All right, so in this video, we are going to look at setting up proportions to solve some word problems. So the most important thing that you're going to see in this video is it's all about consistency when we're setting up our fractions. So if I look at this first example, a scale model of the Titanic is 107.5 inches long and 11.25 inches wide. The Titanic itself was 882.75 feet long. How wide was it? So what I have here, I've got kind of two different things to look at. We've got scale model versus the actual size, and then we've got the length and the width. So when I go ahead and I'm going to set this up by first looking at the scale model. So I'm going to say that 107.5 divided by 11.25. So notice in green, this is everything relating to the scale. And then within my green fraction, I chose to have the length on the top and the width on the bottom. Now, what we have to do is we have to compare this. And so this is where the proportion comes in. We have to compare this to the actual size. So notice I want to know how wide it was given the actual length. So here, the 882 is the length, which means it needs to be on the top of the fraction in the numerator. And it's asking us how wide it was. So the width is the W, which is going to go on the bottom. If you prefer to use x's, please put an x there. It doesn't make a big difference. So now since I have a proportion here, I can actually go ahead and cross multiply these. Only when it's an equal sign is this allowed. So I'm going to go ahead and cross multiply those, and I'm going to cross multiply these. So when I do that, I get a 107.5 W. And sometimes I notice when people cross multiply, they don't know what to do with the two values. We're keeping an equal sign in between them. And then what I have to figure out is what a 11.25 times a 882.75 is. So that number is 9,930.9375. And see, if we look, once we cross multiply, we get this nice equation that now we're going to solve. So a 107.5 divide by 107.5. And so when I do this, I'm going to get let's go ahead and type that out, divided by 107.5. And so I get a 92, and I'm going to go ahead and write 92.4 here. And this was feet because this was talking actual. So my actual width of the Titanic would have been 92.4 feet versus its length being 882.75. And that's how we solve proportions when we're dealing with word problems. So let's just do another one to make sure. A triangle is 20 inches tall and 5 inches wide. If it is reduced to a width of 1 inch, then how tall will it be? So here I'm going to go ahead and compare my 20 to my 5 because this is the first triangle, right? And notice, same idea here. This is how tall, this is how wide. So I'm going to go ahead and use the words of the word problem, tall, wide. And so what I have to be able to do is compare this to something. So 20 goes to 5. It's reduced to a width of 1. So width, I put in the bottom of my fraction, which means I need the 1 to be in the denominator. And then it's asking how tall. That means it doesn't know what goes up at the top. So I have to put an X there. Now I'm where I was before. I get to cross multiply and solve this. And this might be one you could figure out without going through the steps. I'm going to go ahead and write out the steps. I see 5x equals 20. Divide by 5, divide by 5, and x is 4. So that would tell me that this is 4 inches tall. Okay. All right, so let's just look at one more here. just to make sure we are good. So if a 10,000 gallon swimming pool requires 4 ounces of a chemical, then how many ounces of the chemical would be required for a 200 gallon pool? So same deal here. In our first sentence, we get our first fraction. So we know that 10,000 gallons needs 4 ounces of chemical. Now, we're comparing this to what would happen if I had a 200 gallon pool. So this is my gallons, these are my chemicals. So the gallons goes on top, and I need to know how many chemicals I would need. So same deal here. We get to cross multiply. So I'm going to go ahead and cross multiply these quantities. And I would say that a 10,000 times x equals 800. And when I go to solve for x, now you guys have your calculator. Desmos can be open all the time. One little trick when I see these zeros, let's go ahead and get rid of our extra zeros. So I would see that I have an 8 over 100. And this one's actually pretty simple to start breaking down because I could divide each of these by a 4. And so I would get a 2 over 25. Or like I said, just put it in your calculator. If that's too much to process right now, then just type it out and you would see that a 2 over 25 is the same thing as 8 hundredths in decimal form, which is what we have right here. Okay, and so that is how we solve proportions with word problems.